Yes, my friends, things are starting to heat up behind scenes in Denver, and we need to talk about something very important happening with the Broncos right now. We all know this team has big expectations, and man, if Denver really wants to make a serious run this season, Sean Payton has to get these decisions right. I really want to see the Broncos in the Super Bowl, personally. That is the dream, and why not this year? Some fans are getting worried after seeing J.K. Dobbins leave practice with trainers and several Broncos dealing with soft tissue issues, while others believe there is absolutely no reason to panic and that Sean Payton knows exactly how to manage this situation. I want to know which side you're on. Are these training camp injuries starting to concern you? Or do you trust Sean Payton to keep this team healthy and ready when the games really matter? Write your opinion in the comments. And if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 15 years, hit that like button hard. All right, my friends, let's talk about what's happening at Broncos training camp. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is the situation surrounding the injuries at Broncos training camp, because this is exactly the kind of subject that can quickly create panic among fans. You see a player leave practice with trainers, you see a report appear online, and suddenly everybody starts wondering whether something serious has happened. In the case of J.K. Dobbins, though, the information presented here gives us a reason not to immediately assume the worst. Dobbins left practice with trainers, but the important detail is that he jogged off the field. The issue was described as a soft tissue problem, something more along the lines of a strain, discomfort, or tightness, rather than an obvious major injury. So based on the information we have, this is not the moment to panic about Dobbins. At the same time, there is a bigger issue that deserves attention. The concern is not necessarily one individual injury. It is the number of soft tissue problems that have appeared during Broncos training camp. Several players have dealt with issues that have caused them to miss time, including Jalen Waddle, Marvin Mims Jr., J.K. Dobbins, Nick Bonetto, and Luke Wattenberg. That does not mean Denver is facing some kind of injury disaster, and it does not mean these players are dealing with major long-term problems. But when the same general type of issue starts appearing with multiple players, it makes sense for the coaching staff to examine how practice is being handled. And that seems to be exactly what is happening. The Broncos are adjusting their practice habits. More hydration breaks are part of the approach. More attention is being given to stretching and cooling down. Instead of going from maximum effort directly to stopping, the idea is to gradually bring players down from that intensity. Think of it as going from 100% to 80% and then to 50% rather than suddenly shutting everything down. That might sound like a small detail, but during training camp, details like this matter. Sean Payton has a difficult balance to manage. He cannot simply hold every important starter out of practice because the team still needs to prepare. Players need repetitions. The offense needs timing. The defense needs communication. Younger players need to develop. The entire roster needs to be physically prepared for real football. At the same time, there's no prize for winning training camp while losing important players along the way. That balancing act could also affect how much we see Denver starters during the preseason. The expectation presented here is that their workload could be extremely limited. Maybe we see one drive. Maybe we see another short appearance at some point. But the possibility exists that the Broncos will be even more conservative than originally expected. If that happens, it puts even more responsibility on Denver's depth. And fortunately, that is one area where there has been plenty of excitement. Players such as Jonah Ellis, K. Robinson, Jonah Coleman, Hakeem Butler, and Lil Jordan Humphrey have all had moments during camp. Those players could receive plenty of preseason snaps, and some of them may also be asked to contribute in rotational roles once the regular season arrives. That is why preseason football can become much more interesting than the final score suggests. For the starters, it may be about getting a few quality repetitions and getting off the field healthy. For the players fighting for roles behind them, those snaps can become extremely valuable. But there's another side to limiting preseason work. If the starters barely play before the regular season, Denver has to be ready to start quickly when the games actually count. There will be less room for the offense to spend the opening part of the season trying to find its rhythm. The Broncos have to protect their players, but they also have to make sure they are prepared. And there's a very obvious reason health has become such an important part of this conversation. Healthy teams have a much better chance when the biggest games arrive. The Broncos already understand how dramatically injuries can change what a team is capable of doing. The information we have points directly to Bo Nix's ankle and the absence of J.K. Dobbins as examples of how important players being unavailable can change everything, particularly when it affects the running game. So when you hear about another player dealing with tightness or another soft tissue issue, there are really two reactions that can both make sense. The first is not to panic. These are not being presented as catastrophic injuries. The second is to pay attention, because once several players begin dealing with similar problems, the coaching staff has to ask whether anything can be changed. And Sean Payton appears willing to make those changes rather than stubbornly continuing with the same routine. That brings us to the other major part of the story, and I think this one could have a much bigger effect on what the Broncos' offense actually looks like.
Evan Engram. There has been a lot of excitement surrounding what Engram could become in this offense. But what is interesting is that Sean Payton does not appear interested in simply handing him a featured role because of his name or his ability as a receiver. Engram is going to have to earn it. Bo Nix has indicated that Engram is doing more blocking this year than he did last year and described him as a willing blocker. That is important because it begins to explain how Denver may be changing the way Engram is used. We know what makes Engram dangerous. He can run. He can create problems as a receiving tight end. Sean Payton himself said that Engram can be a big asset and identified his ability to run as one of his strengths. Payton also likes the fact that Engram is getting repetitions alongside younger players. But Payton did not stop there. He talked about Davis Webb finding different ways to use Engram and create favorable matchups. Then came the important part. It is not enough to simply design plays that give Engram opportunities. He still has to execute. Ball security matters. Catching the football matters. Reaching the correct landmarks matters. All of those small details matter. And when it comes to getting Engram more touches, Payton's message was clear: those touches have to be earned. That sentence tells us a lot. The Broncos are not treating Engram like a player who automatically deserves the football simply because he is a talented receiving tight end. They are challenging him to become more complete inside this offense. That means blocking. That means lining up closer to the formation. That means being involved in the running game even when he is not touching the football. And if Engram proves he can consistently do those things, it could actually make him more dangerous as a receiver. That may sound strange at first. Why would asking a talented pass catcher to block more help him catch more passes? Because it can make Denver less predictable. If Engram enters the game and the defense believes his presence means the Broncos are probably throwing him a short pass, the defense has already gained information before the snap. But if Engram can line up as a traditional tight end and legitimately participate in the running game, the defense has more possibilities to consider. Denver can run. Denver can show run and use play action. Engram can block and then release. He can still be used in space. He can still create a matchup. Suddenly the defense has to process more information. That appears to fit with the direction of the offense described in the source material. Denver wants to use more under-center concepts. There is also an emphasis on heavier personnel packages and ideas that can connect the running game to